I'm Janice, and I've been doing UX in tech for 17 years now. And I started my career as a user researcher for about 3 years, understanding the why of user behavior. And then for the next probably 13 years, I worked as a UX designer because it turned out I was more of a builder and a maker. And I did do 9 months as a product manager, which was a fun and interesting time. Outside of that, I'm a mentor on ADP lists and first round fast track, and I also co lead Code for San Francisco, where we're an all volunteer group building civic technology for the public good. And I'm generally passionate about seeing great products out in the world, and that's why I'm here today to build up the skills of the next generation of designers. So let's get right into it. I'm not going to talk about why we need to do research, as I'm sure that's been covered, but I want to focus on the how to do the research at a practical level. So let's take a step back and talk about, at a high level, the two major buckets of research. The types of research you would typically be doing when you build digital products fall either under generative research or evaluative research. So, generative research is done early in the design process when you're exploring the problem space. So, you're not looking for solutions, but simply to understand the state of the world and to set the context to the lives of the people you want to build for. So, to give you an example of something from my own life, I used to work at a personalized stationery e commerce company. You go on the website, pick a design, and add your own text to it. If you heard of Shutterfly, we were required by them. So, pretty much the same thing. The business wanted to grow their wedding market share, and so we planned out an entire day where we invited people who recently got married and people who were planning to get married into the office to learn about your experience. What we didn't do is to just make assumptions about these people based on our own experiences. Maybe some of us have been married, but that's not what we are trying to do. We wanted to go out in the world and understand the problem in their context. Evaluative research occurs when you're exploring the solution space. So when you've already come up with a few ideas on how to solve the problem and are just honing in on the best one. There are lots of different methods, frameworks, and activities you can use, and each one does something better than another, and they're all slightly different. I recommend this book, Just Enough Research by Erica Hall, to understand the different methods. So, to get back to the topic at hand, usability testing is just one of the many ways you can do evaluative research. It's popular because it's fast and easy to do, and it gets you the right level of information to help you make design decisions when you're building product. So while usability testing is fast and easy, there are still some skills you need to build up in order to do a proper job of it. Otherwise, the information you collect will be misleading. The first skill is deciding who you want to talk to. There may be non-obvious people who have the answers to your questions you're asking. The second is writing effective survey questions. Most of what a usability test is just asking questions. Learning how to write questions that are open-ended enough to not give away your intention but still elicit the answers you need is a skill that takes practice. The third is just basic interviewing skills. If you're doing a moderated test, moderated just means you're asking the questions live instead of having it all set up to be done asynchronously through some kind of platform. You also need to have some basic interview skills. Active listening, reflection, and encouraging manner all will help you get your participant to relax and tell you what they're thinking. The main point of this slide is there is a difference between the questions you want answers to and the questions you're going to ask. And learning the difference is the key to running a successful usability test. So when do you choose a usability test? You should choose a usability test when you have something to show, you have clear tasks that the users can complete, you have a hypothesis you want to test, you have several equally good versions and no data point that favors one over another, and you are at the point of the design where you feel like you are done. This is my personal favorite where I did all of this research already and I feel like this is ready to ship. I like to give it one more test if I do have the time in order to make sure I haven't missed anything before it gets built. What's the point of a usability test? Let's start with an example. Let's say you work at a travel company like Expedia, for example, and they want to launch a product for companies. something that a company would use internally for employee travel. One of those products would be a workflow for an administrative assistant who supports multiple leaders who have different travel needs and different requirements. Once you have the prototype you want to test, the impossible ideal in this scenario would be to have your prototype running on their computer while they're sitting in the place they would normally do this type of work, and to actually book a typical trip to a big conference, for example. You want to observe not just what they do on the screen, but are they referencing anything? Are there sticky notes on the computer that they keep glancing at? Are there other resources that they're pulling up on their phone? What are they thinking when they're pausing? What are they looking for? What are they thinking? You want to know all of this. So like I said, this is an impossible ideal, but I wanted to show you how we used to simulate this in an office setting as close as we can. So what we have here are two types of usability lab layouts. You still see these at older tech companies where you would invite participants in to run a usability test on. This on the left is a two-stage usability lab, and so you would have the participant in one room by themselves with a two-way mirror, and then in the other room you have your researcher and any additional observers. And so the researcher would run the test remotely here, and they would talk to the participant through a mic and speaker setup that's kind of over on top of the head of the participant over here. So they used to call this the voice of God, which is a little unsettling at first, but you can see the camera set up here. So this is a way for you to stay out of the way and still be able to observe. This other version, the three-stage usability lab, is very similar, but the observers have been kicked out into their own room, and so the researcher can focus on what they're doing. So this is how we used to simulate trying to watch participants in the most unobtrusive way possible. And so this is meant as a joke on quantum mechanics, but in this case, I think it also works for usability testing. So you want to observe, but make the participant feel like they are not being observed, or they will change their behavior to fit in with what they think you want to see and hear. This is what someone told me once. You want to be the fly in the wall, right? You don't want to be noticed. So how do you actually run a usability test? The first step is to plan it out. I found this canvas on the internet and thought it did a good job of putting everything on one page. You don't have to use this particular canvas. There are tons of templates out there. You can use other kinds of framework, and every project is going to need different things. But I thought this was a good outline, so I will just use it to help explain the process further. So the first square of this canvas is, what are you testing? What is the product under test? There are two callouts here. One is just like, what is the actual thing you're testing, the actual prototype? And the other is understanding why is this being built in the first place? What is the user experience and business that they are going after? It's important to understand the context of why is your company doing this? Why are you building this? The business case of research. Research is often the first thing that gets cut, so if you could articulate the risks of not doing research and being able to prioritize the research in a way that aligns with the business impact, you're going to gain trust with the teams you work with. And the risks of not testing is simply that you might spend time, which equals money, to build something that doesn't meet the needs of your user. And sometimes that is okay. The speed of getting something to the market fast and testing out live is worth more than getting it wrong. So being intentional about why you test is good practice. Don't do something just to do it. Next one is test objectives. Basically, this is all the things you want to learn. Write them out, order them in order of importance, so if you run out of time, you know what to skip. Everything else here on this canvas is anchored on what you write here. Who do you want to talk to? Who you pick as participants will affect the type of tasks you write. Generally, 5 to 7 participants will be enough to discover something you can act on. If you have multiple type users, then 5 to 7 of each. But realistically, at 3, you already have some idea, and the 4th and 5th participant is to get more confidence. Logistics. Often the tools you use is just dictated by what you have access to. Lots of ways to go about it, from the over-the-top production with dedicated rooms like I showed you with mics and cameras, to what we used to call guerrilla testing, where you just run around with a laptop and ask anyone who would talk to you to, like, hey, can you do this thing on my laptop real quick? The easiest to access now are these online platforms with panels of people you can choose from, and all of the equipment is just part of the app itself, and you just have to pay them either a subscription or like a per participant fee, and it's all there. Test tasks. So you need to develop all of the tasks that will get you the answers to your questions. Remember, what you ask is not the same as the questions you want answers to. You want to develop the task that will reveal the answers to your testing goals. So, for example, if you're testing whether someone can find the buy button on an e-commerce site, the task might be find something you want on this website and let me know when you think you've completed the purchase. Something like that. So just don't say, find the buy button. Can you find the buy button? That's a terrible question. Location and dates. I feel like this is more talking towards the communication of this testing that you're going to be doing. People are interested in research. They love that they don't have to plan and do all this, and they can just get the results. So they are very interested and they want to be involved. If people want to watch live, or if they're just eagerly waiting for the results, I think part of your communication plan, you should share all of this information to as many people as you can, as many people across the company or people who are interested. Setting expectations on when your results will be shared is just good communication. This is what we used to call a test script. Basically, you should write down all of the tasks in order, add in everything you want to ask. It helps to remind yourself here why you are asking these questions in case the participant throws you off course, which happens, and you can easily switch gears on the fly and get back to what you were trying to learn in the first place. Often the conversation veers towards something that you're not really interested in, but you politely kind of steer the conversation back. And so if you have a great script written out, you can easily get back on track. So now that you've planned everything, it's time to run it. I found this video that perfectly captures what it's like to watch a usability test as a designer.
This is a square. Can you guess which spot that goes in?
The square.
That's right. It goes in the square hole.
Yes. Okay.
And how about this rectangle? That one?
Also the square.
That goes in there too.
Yeah.
Up next, we've got this thin rectangle.
The thin rectangle.
Can you guess where that goes?
The thin rectangle.
That's right. It goes in the square hole. And up next, a cylinder.
The circle.
I think that goes in
The circle.
the square hole. Now, we've also got this semicircle right here. Do you see a slot that would fit
The semicircle.
Semicircle?
The semicircle.
That's right. It's the square hole. Okay. Up next, the triangle. We know what hole that goes
The
into,
triangle.
right?
Triangle.
That's right. The square hole. And up next, we have the arch.
The arch. The
And
arch.
you guessed it.
The arch.
It goes in the square hole.
If you're doing a moderated test, don't be like this product designer and give any clues on what the expected outcome would be. Stay as neutral as possible, don't give them any clues, and see what they naturally want to do. The other trick is to keep them talking. You cannot read minds, and people naturally do not think out loud, but in this case, you do want them to verbalize everything that they're thinking. And sometimes they do get a little bit quiet. The natural inclination is to just show them what to do next, but you can definitely prompt them if they stay too quiet for too long or if they hover their mouse over something looking unsure. And the way you do that is just asking open-ended, oh, what are you looking for? What are you looking at? What are you trying to do right now? Or what do you want to do next? Keep it open-ended and see what they say. So the next step is, now that you have all of these transcripts, what are you supposed to do with them? How do you turn the data into insights? So there's a lot of tools out there where you can help you organize and pull out patterns and analyze the transcripts for patterns. There's a tool called Dovetail that I personally have not used, but I know a lot of people who have and love it. The short answer to this is just find the patterns. Really, this is the hardest part of this exercise. But now there's tools and AI that can help. I wouldn't rely entirely on it, but it'll help you get past that initial hurdle of all of this data. And so what's my personal process in organizing this? So I like to organize everything that emerges into 3 groups. So the first one is what I expected. I had assumptions, I had hypotheses about what people would do, and it turned out I was right. There's usually you're very wrong, especially if this is your first usability test. But I would put these in one bucket. The second bucket is kind of unexpected, given your hypothesis, and this shouldn't make sense, but you're seeing this happen constantly. So clearly, this is something that you need to look into and understand a bit more. And then there's like the outliers, like people are just using your tool for something completely unexpected. And it's interesting and you don't want to forget about it. But so you want to put these things in a third bucket. And so you mark how often each one occurs. There's different ways to do this. You can kind of do dot voting, however you want to mark down how often something occurs so you can easily, at a glance, understand it. And then I go back to my hypothesis questions and see how well this answers all the questions I had and the objectives I set out at the beginning of the test. And that's kind of how you build your test report at the end of the day. Sharing it. So you did all this work, and sharing it is really important. We used to do really long reports. Now I personally prefer video. You can do it however you want. There's no standard way. There's no standard template. You can Google a template, and if you like it, you can use it. If you come up with something super cool that's neither a text form or a video form, you can do that too. The idea is communication. Can you communicate the ideas to the people who were not there? And if you can, that's how you do it. A normal structure of a report is you should start the report with insights and recommendations. Make it short and punchy. A lot of people don't have time to read all the details of everything that you did. They just came for the answer to the questions that they had. And so you should give that to them up front. And then for the rest of the report, you can go into each of the insights that you pulled out. You can keep them in those 3 buckets if you like. When you report on what you saw, I was personally given advice to never use numbers. So don't say, 2 out of 5 participants did this. Say something like, some participants did this and many participants did that. That way, it doesn't give it specificity that is a little bit misleading. Like you can calculate a percentage out of 2 out of 5, and that's too precise for what we're trying to do. It's very qualitative, and so it's only really supposed to give you direction. And so you need to keep it at that level, even in the way you report. And if you have compelling video snippets to support your analysis, those are really powerful and people really enjoy them, and it makes your report a little bit more memorable. And you should end with the insights and recommendations again, but with more explanation. Tie it back to the goals of the product and the business, which is also important. And add an appendix to the actual data. So if there was one particular participant that they're like, I want to dig into this person more, so the transcripts, the videos, any spreadsheets you used, if at all possible, those should be tacked on at the end and available to everyone. My final thoughts: usability testing is not like a checkbox in some mythical design process that must be done on everything. You should understand what you can learn with usability testing and look at your situation to see if it is needed. Along the same lines, the point of usability testing is to come out with something you can act on. It's a means to an end and not an end in and of itself. So coming out with recommendations you can use is the main point. And last but not least, when you run a usability testing, you're very down in the weeds, in the details, especially with all the planning and going into every page of the task flow. And so it's important to tie this back to the business goals. Why is this thing being built? It's important to zoom back out and see how your piece of the puzzle fits into the larger picture. Be explicit about tying that back to the bigger goal and the vision and the mission. So that's it. Here's a list of resources that I shared throughout my presentation, and thank you.